Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Dean Murray. Dean Murray represents the 3rd Assembly District in New York State, an assembly district that includes parts of Suffolk County. We want to thank you folks all across Long Island for tuning in for our program today. Dean Murray, pleasure to have you here in the midst of the budget debate, which is now very heavily underway here at the state capitol.
Extremely. It is very interesting. By the way, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. And there's a lot of
going
this going
around,
on.
I'll tell
you
you.
had it for a little bit.
I
I've
did.
had it for a long while, it seems. Hope you folks have been able to stay away from it. But boy, it seems like everybody you talk to, right?
That's it. Everybody's getting hit with something. So once we get past that, then it's the budget.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know which is worse sometimes.
I think I'd take the cold.
Let's talk a little bit about this budget debate. As I said, we're really knee-deep in it right now. The legislature got the governor's budget proposal a couple weeks ago now. Budget hearings are being held, the legislative budget hearings, where the Assembly and the Senate sit down together, invite all the department heads in and other interested parties who talk about the impact of this budget on them. And not too surprisingly, most people are saying the same thing. It's like,
Absolutely.
well, this is going to mean some pretty drastic cutbacks in the services we can provide.
Right. Well, you know what's funny? You mentioned that we're into it now, and you know, it was a couple weeks ago the governor released his budget proposal, and although we're into it, we still don't have details. We are still short of details right now, and that is the biggest. I mean, you'll hear it. It sounds like a mantra coming from everyone, but the reason it does is because it's absolutely true. This budget, it was more like a governor's idea of a budget. But the details were just not there. When we're talking about mandate relief, okay, great. He put together a mandate relief team. That's terrific. And hopefully this mandate relief team will be listening to everyone, because I've talked to our school districts, our local governments, and asked them, give us the mandates that you need relief from. You know, you would know better than I would. Tell us what you absolutely don't need, what's draining your budgets, and let's take a look at it and see if it's really necessary. But what's going to happen is we'll give it to the team, hope the team makes recommendations there, but the governor really hasn't stepped up and said X, Y, Z. You know, we need to cut this out or we need to eliminate that. He's just kind of saying, I have the idea, here's the framework, go do it.
He spoke in pretty general terms when he handed his budget proposal to the legislature. In fact, let's take a listen to some of what the governor said that day, and you'll hear some pretty dire words, but again, you don't get the details from the budget, from the governor, in the speech itself. Let's take a look and listen. We'll be back to talk more about it all with Dean Murray.
We're here to obviously talk about the 2011-12 executive budget.
Governor Andrew Cuomo pulled no punches as he explained to lawmakers why state government is facing billion-dollar deficits.
We spend too much money, which is not new, but it's worse. 74% increase over the past 10 years in spending. And when you look at what we spend more than we make, which is never a good formula in life.
The governor also made the point all that spending didn't buy the state all that much.
Well, maybe we spend a lot of money, but we get great product for it. We really get our money's worth. If only it were true. Number 1 in education, number 34 in results, number 1 in spending in Medicaid, number 21 in results, $1.6 billion in economic development, number 50 in terms of result.
Assembly Republicans say it's a message they've been giving for years.
Certainly a sobering message of cost reduction is sorely needed in state government, a message that I've been talking about for years. Consolidation of state agencies, less spending, no tax increases, which is very, very important. But it's going to be challenging times.
It's clear the governor got the message that we do need to cut state spending, and he's proposed quite a bit of cutting. However, the devil's in the details. Our problem right now is when we talk things like tax cap, mandate relief, Medicaid reform, he's put together nice teams to take a look at this, but he hasn't released any details. What types of mandates will we be cutting or getting rid of? What types of Medicaid relief are we going to see? So I'm taking a cautiously optimistic approach in the fact that I think he gets the message, but again, the devil's in the details.
Government is supposed to serve people. That's what this was about, and that's what we have to get back to.
We're still waiting for those details again on a lot of subject areas. Those teams that You've been talking about that the governor's put together on issues like Medicaid spending, educational spending and funding, how to fund and get the best results for education. I think his team on government efficiencies and consolidations hasn't even met yet.
Yeah, right. I mean, the clock is ticking, and here's how I see this playing out, and it could be unfortunate, and I hope I'm wrong. I see it playing out as we're dragging through. The March 1st is when he's expecting recommendations from these teams. And then if he doesn't hear the recommendations that he thinks he wants, he's going to say, well, I'm going to have to then step in. I gave you the chance, but now I'm going to have to step in to make the hard cuts and the hard decisions and all. And while we're saying the devil's in the details, there were a few details that were released as far as state aid to education. And those details were not good for Long Island. The fact of the matter is, and we've long said this, that Long Island does not get its fair share of state aid. And the proof is in the numbers. It's irrefutable. We have 17% of the students in the state. We get less than 12% of the state aid funding. I mean, those numbers, in any math class, that doesn't add up. And so when he did release some of the state aid funding, he said, overall, we're going to have a 2.9% reduction in education funding. Well, that factored in some federal money, too. So it was a $1.5 billion cut in state aid. So state aid funding was being cut 7.3%. But of course, then you look at the Long Island schools, and magically that number rises to 11%. And once again, we're saying, are you kidding? You can't keep coming back to this well. You've drained it. We're dry. It has to be more equitable. We don't mind taking our cuts. We know we have to. But come on, 7.3 to 11?
It sounds as if every school district is going to be getting a smaller share of the pie with less monies to spend, it sounds like that could be an opportunity to almost equal things out a little bit and get Long Island schools their percentage.
We wish. Yeah. Don't we wish? But I'll give you an example. In my district, I have 7 school districts in my 3rd Assembly District, and one of them is Sachem. Now we're talking about 7.3% reduction to state aid on average to schools. Sachem is well over 16% a cut. You're talking about Longwood. Longwood's well over 14% proposed cut in state aid. That doesn't sound equitable to me. That's more than double what the state average is. So, again, how are we going to bring this in and make it at least resemble something fair? So that's the struggle we're having right now. And I know that both sides of the aisle, the Long Island delegation, we're standing together here to fight against this because it simply isn't fair. We've been saying we know we need more efficiencies, we need to run things more efficiently, and we do need to cut the spending. And we get it, absolutely. There are places we can cut in education that won't hurt the kids. But with that said, it's got to be fair. It's got to be equitable, and it's not right now.
And you touch on an interesting point right there, because you have been advocating since your election to the New York State Legislature that the state needs to run a tighter ship, that it's been overspending way past its means for many, many years now. And when you are able to write that, and it sounds like this might be the year where you've got the legislature thinking the same way as the governor is thinking, and you may be able to do that, there's going to be some pain. People are going to see some changes in the services they get, or some services that may just go away.
Absolutely. And again, that's where we have to evaluate exactly, I keep saying this, I have said this over and over again since the day I was sworn in, and that was, when we're looking at budget issues, when we're looking at funding right now, we have got to take a more business-like approach, and the 3 letters that we have to factor into everything are ROI, and that's return on investment. Are we getting the return on investment? Because right now, we don't have the money to just throw out there. Right now, every penny we spend is an investment. And we have to look at it that way. And are we getting the return that we need on that investment?
Well, you heard the little cut from the governor there in which he said we're #1 in education spending and 34, I think, in results. #1 in Medicaid spending, near the bottom of that list. Near the top in economic development spending, 50th in the United States, and bringing new jobs and new companies into New York State.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. If we want to turn the state around, that is by far the biggest issue we must tackle. We must become a more business-friendly state. And unfortunately, we took a step backwards last year. When we got rid of the Empire Zone and replaced it with a watered-down Excelsior program, that was a step backwards. Not only that, but what we said to some of the existing businesses that already had contracts and agreements with the state in the Empire Zone for some tax credits, we told them, you're not going to get those this year. I know we had an agreement, but you're not going to get those this year. So we're going to defer that back about 3 years or so, and maybe we'll ease them back into you then. Now, how does that entice any business to come to New York when the government won't even keep its word to the existing businesses?
There's been a lack of creativity, it seems, on how to help make ends meet. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, well, kicking and screaming to the table about making these spending cuts, but very few palatable ways of how to increase revenues. You don't want to raise taxes. We've been there, done that kind of a thing, and so forth. You have come up with a way. You have said, there is something that New York State hasn't done,
right,
that a lot of other states have done. Maybe New York State ought to consider it, and that's bringing in mixed martial arts.
Absolutely.
Right now, that's not permissible in New York.
Right. But in 1997, Governor Pataki actually signed and outlawed it in New York. It is legal in 44 other states. There are only 4 states that have athletic commissions where it's not legal, New York being one of them. And the other 2 don't have athletic commissions. But there is no reason that we should not have that here. We're talking about a whole new industry here that we could bring to New York that would create jobs, that would create tens of millions of dollars in economic impact. There is no reason for us not to have that in New York.
I thought it was kind of a sly move the other day when you brought somebody special in for an introduction to the Assembly Chamber. Let's take a look.
It's my pleasure to be joined today by Mr. Frank Shamrock, a retired American mixed martial arts champion. Frank Shamrock was the first athlete to hold the UFC middleweight championship and retired as the 4-time defending undefeated champion. He is widely credited as being the #1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world during his reign as middleweight champion. Mr. Shamrock has also won numerous titles in other mixed martial arts organizations. He has been named Fighter of the Decade for the 1990s, Best Full Contact Fighter, and 3-time Fighter of the Year. He is a 7th degree black belt. If you could extend a warm welcome and all the cordialities of the House, it would be very much appreciated.
Gladly. Only the cordialities. We don't have to meet later on. On behalf of Mr. Murray, please welcome to the floor. Enjoy the privileges of the floor. On behalf of the Speaker and all my colleagues, we're very honored that you're with us here today, and we hope that you come back real soon. Thank you for being here with us.
Some guys just look like tough guys, right?
Yeah, you don't want to get him upset with you.
Now, you were telling me that you've had a lot of people, as you've discussed it with your colleagues about the mixed martial arts and bringing that to New York State, how they say, no, that would be awful, awful, awful. That would be the worst thing they could do. But on the side, on that day, they were coming over. Can we get a picture
Shaking
taken?
His hand, getting a picture taken. Of course, to be honest with you, I've talked to several people who were on the fence or even on the other side before, saying, maybe not, that have come back over and said, you know what, maybe it's not a bad idea.
Well, New York State has had professional wrestling at various venues for years and years. It used to be the home of boxing.
Boxing, absolutely. The Mecca.
Yeah, you go to Madison Square Garden or, all sorts of some of the major bouts of all time here in New York State.
And it's not that MMA is not available in New York. You can watch it on pay-per-view. It's on network TV. It's here. It's available. It's just not available live. So, we're losing tourism revenue and we're missing out. We're really missing out.
Yeah, so there's also, like I said, a shortage of those ideas of how New York State, well, that does a couple things. Besides bringing the straight dollars in from the events themselves, it attracts businesses.
Sure.
People used to, when they talk about the major boxing bouts in this country, let's go to New York. Let's go to New York City and see what's going on.
Yeah.
If you folks want to reach out to your representative, it's an easy thing for you to do. You get a hold of Dean Murray at his office in Medford. You can do it a couple different ways. You can dial 207-0073 or drop an email at the address you see right there on the bottom of the screen. We'll be talking with Dean Murray here for the next several weeks as to what's going on at the state capitol by way of the budget talks. Dean Murray, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you folks too. Hope to see you soon for that next edition of Assembly Calendar.